Welcome to Now, Steps We Can Take to Get to the Good. My name is Becca Drayer. I am the program manager at Impact Research and the Crash Center for Research and Education. We are a traffic safety research and engineering firm in Columbia, Maryland, and I'm happy to be here today as a member of the Lifesavers Vehicle Technology and Automated Driving Planning Committee, and I will be acting as the moderator for this session. We have 3 speakers today. Actually, I'll read a description of the session briefly. Using FHWA grant funds, the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute automated a Ford F-150 with various features and functionalities to demonstrate how these technologies could be applied to solve challenging interactions that Level 4 ADS vehicles might encounter with public safety professionals. Presenters will review 18 scenarios defined by the project partners. Through outreach, the project team investigated the context of the scenarios, feasibility of solutions, reactions to technologies, and conducted hands-on demonstrations. Outcomes of the demonstrations, including feedback on the technical solutions and resulting data available to the public, will be discussed. Our first speaker is Dr. Michael Mollenhauer. He currently leads the Division of Technical Implementation at the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute. The DTI provides technology implementation assistance services for industry partners and transportation agencies that are exploring connected and automated vehicle deployments in their jurisdictions. He oversees the design, development, deployment, and maintenance of CAV vehicle and supporting smart infrastructure platforms designed to facilitate early-stage deployment and evaluation. In addition, Dr. Mollenhauer facilitates the design and implementation of CAV technologies developed through applied research, where they provide safety and mobility to VTTI's clientele. Welcome, Dr. Mollenhauer.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much. For those who don't know what the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute is, we are one of 7 different institutes that have been stood up at Virginia Tech to address problems of national importance. And roadway safety and mobility challenges have been deemed one of those very critical issues that we want to look into. And so we're trying to lead the way on the research side of things to help assure that when these products come along, that they're introduced in a proper way, in a safe manner, so that there's excellent public benefit. But our mission in general is to save lives, time, and money while protecting the environment. About 4 years ago, the Federal Highway Administration announced an automated driving system demonstration grant program. And so really it was about multiple awardees with different projects were to focus in on level 3 plus automation. Hopefully everybody knows the different levels of automation, but that's effectively either the driver has to be able to take over the vehicle in a very short period of time, or there's no controls in the vehicle at all, and it's all up to the automated system. But the goals here were really to get different groups of people collaborating and talking about how these solutions can be brought to bear that wouldn't normally be in the room talking together. And so that collaborative effort is one that we engaged in as well. The US DOT made 8 awards totaling $60 million, and almost all the programs are of a 4-year duration. So we were very lucky at Virginia Tech to have won 2 of these programs. One at our facility focuses on how do you integrate automated trucking solutions into trucking concept or their normal trucking operations. And then ours really kind of focused in on public safety. So how do you build a level 4 automated vehicle that can interact with public safety in a safe way, in an intuitive way, so that everybody can do their jobs that they need to do. So our role in the ADS Demonstration Grant Collective, if you look across the 8 products, there were some of the groups who won the awards purchased effectively off-the-shelf automated solutions that were available at the time and integrated them into systems. So there was one, for example, operating in a rural environment on gravel roads up in Iowa, and there's others that had low-speed shuttles that were operating around urban areas. Our approach was a little bit different in that we wanted to develop a solution that we could do additional research on, but also kind of demonstrate to public safety, so that's law enforcement, EMS, fire folks, that these systems could be, developed safely, and we could test out the solutions with them to see what their feedback was on them. So we were a little bit different approach. We probably ended up with a little bit less data because we were not running as long. We were taking a lot of our time during the program to develop the solutions, but I think we've shown some pretty interesting concepts that might be something that industry can look at moving forward as viable solutions. So again, I mentioned, our demonstration concept was really around safe level 4 ADS interactions with public safety. We also had a cooperative automation driving scenario where we wanted to show how vehicles could operate in the strings effectively, or have string-seeking behavior while taking information from a traffic operations center that's the output of a dynamic speed harmonization solution, and then be able to respond to any kind of speed changes or headway changes that the traffic operations center was recommending to them. And so that's one of the additional items that we deployed and developed on the roads up in Northern Virginia where we operated. So there was really 4 tasks. I'll just briefly describe each of those that we went through, and then I'll pass the mic over to Joe McLaine from GM to tell you a little bit more about some of the scenarios that we worked on. Task 1 was to really develop solutions for corridor optimization. This was a design effort. We collaborated pretty heavily with Transurban. They operate the I-95 and I-395 express lanes system in Northern Virginia. And there is a crossover period when they are running traffic downtown. They reverse the lanes and run traffic out of town in the second part of the day. And our opportunity to demonstrate on the public roadway was to do it when the traffic was shut off on that roadway, right? So we did staging of the scenarios, but we did operate on public roadways in that environment. And so in order to facilitate that, we had to work with Transurban and working with their people to get information from their traffic operations center that was useful to the ADS vehicles when it was operating. And task 1 was really about doing the design of all that activity. Task 2 was led by our friends at Camp and Joe McLaine, and that was really about, hey, what scenarios do we really want to address, and what is the requirement for a level 4 ADS when it comes to interacting with public safety? And they developed a full, very long form document, but we also have, I guess, some more minimal descriptions of those solutions that are now available on a website. And at the end of the presentation, I'll give a QR code where you can pull up the website and take a look at some of the additional scenarios that we worked on that we won't even be talking about today. Task 3 is where we actually built our level 4 reference vehicle. So we have a pretty capable staff at VTTI of both hardware and software development. We took a standard hybrid off-the-shelf F-150 and built in the automation features to that, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. In Task 4, we actually built the Traffic Operations Center's applications. So this is a dynamic speed harmonization solution, as well as an operational design data solution as well that you can that the vehicle could query to get a lot of information about the conditions on the roadway to operate more safely. Austin Averkamp, another team member, will be talking about that later on. Task 5 is where we actually designed and conducted the scenarios. So we had, I guess, a couple week-long demonstration activities where we had 3 days where we would take people out on the road and show them how they worked, how everything worked. Some of the folks rode along in a bus as well to try to get a sense for how this actually worked in the live demonstrations. And then we built, and Task 6 is actually to build the website for data dissemination. And so there's a bunch of videos that are out there that we have created that talk about the problem that we're trying to solve, as well as how we went about trying to solve them. And there's some additional pages that talk about the technology itself and the approach we took to building it. So I'm going to turn over to the mic now to Joe, and Joe's going to describe the process that Camp went through in order to be able to define these scenarios.
Joe joined General Motors in 2017 after a very successful career in the U.S. military, where he served as an Army aviation officer. He was an attack helicopter pilot, commander, assistant professor at West Point, and finished his time as a paratrooper with the 82nd Airborne Division. As part of GM's global product development and safety organizations, Mr. McLaine has supported multiple vehicle programs with an emphasis on automated driving systems, driver performance, safety, and innovation. Mr. McLaine has served as Camp's chairman since 2020. He holds several U.S. patents and has published a number of technical papers.
Thanks, Becca. Welcome to everybody. Kind of funny that we have an auto show happening in the same building that we have Lifesavers today. But has anybody heard of Camp? Camp is the Crash Avoidance Metrics Partners. It's an LLC that was formed by Ford and GM several decades ago, looking at crash avoidance metrics that have developed into automatic emergency braking, lane keep assist, lane departure warnings, other things that were valuable on crash avoidance systems that are now widely deployed on almost all modern vehicles. It has moved into, in the last 10 years or so, looking at connected vehicle research. And some of the things that Mike talked about, and one of the scenarios that we are very happy that were implemented in the SOAS research, were a connected driving automation scenario where we had vehicles operating in strings and cooperative automated driving is really the wave of the future. There are all numbers of level 2, and we had certain members of our camp team. The camp team consisted of General Motors, myself. We had members from Ford, Daimler-Benz, Mercedes, and Nissan. And during the project time, Ford did abandon their L4 programs with a lot of angst or discussion on why that happened. But all of the automakers are committed to deploying these vehicles safely and making sure that all the scenarios and more, the ones that we developed, are considered from the very beginning. For those that didn't know, that CAMP and General Motors, certainly, and all the other project member partners have been part of GHSA, AMVA, and working with collaborative partners in this space for traffic safety for a long, long time. And certainly, if everyone is here in this audience has read, the various putouts from the U.S. Department of Transportation about the federal automated vehicle policies, certainly General Motors ascribed most of those and helped guide and give some policy advice as well. We do have regular communication, as do all of our other OEM partners, with NHTSA and all regulators around the world. But I want to talk a little bit about also the training and outreach we did around electric vehicles. Because what you're seeing, and we had people from Waymo present earlier, and we had certainly other people that are using electrified vehicles. Mike Mollenhauer and the VTTI team certainly used a hybrid approach of an F-150, but all of our autonomous vehicles at General Motors are going to be EVs. And so for the past 18 months to 2 years, GM has led an EV first responder training that's now available for people to see online. The genesis of that really came from the exec director, Zach Dorzaf, from VTTI, the chair and the director of the AV Safety Consortium within SAE, ITC, and others. But we're really proud to say that we are putting safety from whether electric vehicles or automated vehicles at the forefront. I'm going to talk about some previous research that CAMP has done around automated vehicles. And if you haven't been familiar with CAMP in the past, back in 2018, again, one of our project partners was VTTI, but UMass Amherst and others, a consortium of automakers looking at automated vehicle public safety interactions and how we could create or define some common solutions. All these products were federally funded. You can see the research in the documents that have been put on the CAMP website, as well as with Federal Highway. But we defined the interactions as either direct, indirect, or informational. And you'll see a lot of the same considerations and concerns that people have around automated vehicles were being thought of well before this, including police stops, interactions with emergency vehicles that might result in blockages, how you might stop a vehicle, and we took that even further with the SOADS project. Certainly, we looked at all the hierarchical task analyses with that work at Automated Public Safety Common Solutions, and we identified the interactions in this HTA, and we, again, carried that over and looked at some of the minimum performance requirements with the SOADS project and expanded that. I'll take just a minute or two to talk about the CADS IFM approach. So CAMP, again, with a federally highway-funded program, was looking at cooperative automated driving, and we had a concept that we're really fond of called improved freeway mobility. And the first demonstration of that was the SOADS demonstration with the VTTI and the help of Austin Averkamp and the Transurban team on the closed I-395 corridor. The corridor, high-speed corridor in Washington, D.C., in the metro area was closed, but we conducted these string operations where vehicles were communicating up and down the string and could coordinate their movement in time and space. We've also had people on the last panel from the state of Texas. And again, CAMP was involved with the Texas A&M, TTI, the Texas Transportation Institute, on a project, again, advancing, looking at cooperative automated driving in this project called Traffic Optimization on Signalized Corridors. So how vehicles could have a coordinated stop and start, again, moving forward and on signalized corridors with traffic control devices and moving forward and backward, or moving forwards. One thing that I'll talk about, and we took a step forward, and I've got an example of the app on a tablet to show you all. We certainly know, and maybe if you're aware of all the electric vehicle first responder documents, and I'll briefly talk about some of the first responder training, but most of those documents and those presentations of information are in 2 dimensions. And certainly no one's carrying around binders, and no one's even recommending that people carry around binders or have links to or QR codes when you're at an accident scene. That sounds ridiculous to us. But the idea of having information pushed to you through what might emerge as the next gen 911 or other technologies emerging in not just the United States but around the world, in which you might be able to see in 3 dimensions the vehicle structure, if it has high voltage systems or batteries, and incident information and all kinds of other things that might be provided for a more timely response. Again, you don't need to waste time with an incident commander or on-scene commander to worry about phoning back and finding out what is the specifics about this vehicle, or even waiting for a cell signal to download a PDF to take a look at. So we think in the not too distant future, and we're partnering with the National Renewable Energies Lab from the Department of Energy, looking for partners to say, is this a reasonable approach for improving first responder intelligence? Really briefly, GM launched an EV first responder training that maybe you've heard about, but if you haven't, I'd like you to check it out. GMEVFirstResponderTraining.com is where we posted all of the videos that we've done. We went all around the country and into one province in Canada and talked about electrified vehicles and some of the approaches that you might make and identifying those systems and understanding how to interact with them. Bottom line, there's not going to be a whole lot of difference in interacting with electrified vehicles than there are in the standard operating procedures that you have with internal combustion engine vehicles. There are some nuances, and certainly there'll be even more nuances in dealing with automated vehicles, but I think this is a good start. Those videos are available right now. We launched them last quarter in 2024. You can take them for free. You can spread the word amongst your first responders, your traffic incident management professionals, state DOTs. It's meant for the general public as well. So if you want to take that training, again, it's free of charge, GMEVFirstResponderTraining.com. Let's take a look at those first responder information documents. Again, like I said, those are presented right now in 2 dimensions. And what we've done is we followed an ISO 17840 format that is standardized across the industry and taking a look. And we've even done that for our Cruise automated vehicles programs. The Cruise AV is based on a Bolt-based AV, and the Cruise Origin is coming as the first purpose-built level 4 that General Motors has ever done. But those rescue documents and those rescue sheets are available right now as well for you to take a look at. We're being completely transparent about how emergency responders, and not just the fire service, but law enforcement, towing professionals, and other on-scene personnel might interact with our automated vehicles. And these include both GM-produced rescue sheets and rescue documents, as well as that by Cruise. Let's talk about SOADs for a little bit longer than I wanted to talk about GM. So CAMP partnered with VTTI and looked at this project and said, absolutely, we want to be a part. And the task was to come up with any number of scenarios that might be challenging within our own development and things that we have seen. And of course, those last 4 years have been certainly consequential. You've seen incidents in almost all deployed markets where level 4 have been, but those are learning points and those are pivot points. I'll talk about the scenarios that we developed. We came up with a total number of 18. The demonstrations that were provided in Northern Virginia earlier or late last year, and certainly Mike and the VTTI team have awesome videos at the website right now. But they included, and I'll talk at length about some of these, a police pullover event. We know that there is angst amongst the law enforcement community about how you interact with a vehicle that may not have a human driver. We know that there may be incidents where you're wondering if the AV is going to yield the right of way or even be able to pull over, and how do you communicate with that? Some of the things that have been demonstrated in the SOADS project include innovative techniques of presenting that information on vehicle glass, having buttons and things to immobilize the vehicle if it is involved in a police stop. But certainly, the approaches that we have here involve a large dose of connected vehicle technology, vehicle to everything, and we know if you're listening to the last panelist and you're aware of the connected vehicle solutions in the United States, they are coming, but they are going to be launched on who knows what spectrum, and that's kind of what the industry is worried about. We know that emergency vehicle localization and response, that was the concern, and again, born out of firsthand experience of the vehicles maybe not giving the right of way or yielding to fire trucks or wondering about how they might respond and yield to first responder or emergency vehicles that might be asking them to move out of the way and violate a traffic condition or a traffic control device. Again, we think some of the technologies that are already and have been demonstrated to be implemented by Mike Mollenhauer and the VTTI team using standard message sets that have already been put out from the Society of Automotive Engineers, SAE, and those message standards, we're able to successfully do that. The next scenario that I want to talk about is manual traffic control. And something really cool that will show up in the video is, and you might have concerns about how these automated vehicles are going to deal with hand and arm signals. The sensor suites and the technologies are so awesome that they can define or find different digits of the fingers. And certainly if there are signage improvements or other things that might be involved in a lollipop sign. So the scenario that we designed was how you might tell an automated vehicle to stop, slow, or move beyond what is known as a manual traffic control. And whether that's in a parking garage or at an event or at a traffic scene where there may be an unplanned traffic condition or road washout or road work zone, those are all very significant topics. The next one I want to talk about is that rescue information provided to emergency responders. And again, VTTI took the concept that we had of a 3D immersive approach to giving information about that vehicle that is involved in the incident and overlaying it with information that might be available from telematics or from the public safety access point or dispatch. But we think that is the wave of the future, not sending QR codes or necessarily sending PDFs, though we're exploring hot links and other things to send, that as part of the dispatch correspondence. I want to thank VTTI, Federal Highway, and others that allowed us to participate in this program. I also want to tell you that connectivity really did do a lot more than people are giving it credit for. So vehicle to vehicle, vehicle everything technologies, and whether it comes from dedicated short-range comms or from wireless technologies, there are tremendous opportunities for these and many more scenarios that we weren't able to demonstrate in this 4-year project, but we look forward to doing more in the future. I'll pass it off to Austin.
Austin Averkamp is the principal of Smart Infrastructure with Transurban North American Strategic Innovation Group. Within the Strategic Innovation function, Austin leads and manages the planning, design, development, deployment, and operation of intelligent and connected infrastructure. These initiatives range from incremental safety benefits to transformational mobility initiatives. He has 8 years of connected and automated vehicles experience, including smart connected infrastructure.
Hello, everyone. So I'm going to first give some background about who Transurban is. So Transurban is one of the world's largest toll road operators and developers with roads across Australia, Canada, and in Virginia. Transurban also has a long history of innovation from our beginnings as one of the world's first free-flowing toll systems, which enables us to support 2.5 million trips every single day across our network. And through the U.S. first dynamically priced express lanes on the 95 and 395 express lanes, helping us to save our customers 428,000 hours every single workday, to our sustainability focus on reducing greenhouse gas emissions to a net zero by 2050. More specifically in Virginia, Transurban formed a public-private partnership with the Virginia Department of Transportation to design, build, finance, operate, and maintain the 495, 95, and 395 express lanes. The 95 and 395 express lanes are the nation's longest reversible roadway that uses dynamic pricing to regulate the traffic to maintain high-quality throughput. The reversibility of the express lanes enables us to safely test innovative technologies on real roads. These innovations wouldn't be possible without the collaboration of our partners, both public, private, and academia, and we're happy to have the opportunity to continuously collaborate with our stakeholders locally and nationally to address the needs of our customers. So first, I want to set a little bit of background and maybe perhaps clear up any sort of misconceptions about vehicle automation. So vehicle automation has been defined by the Society of Automotive Engineers with 6 different levels. So working from left to right are increasing levels of automation with the vehicle handling more and more of the decision-making process of the dynamic driving task. Levels 0 to 2 are only assistive features, and this would be an equivalent to a Tesla that you operate today, no matter what their marketing is. Level 3 and level 4 are in certain environments the vehicle can drive itself, but in others the human must take control. An example of this are automated trucks operating in the Sun Belt on specific interstate routes. Finally, level 5 is where the vehicle can always handle the driving task in every single situation. This delineation of who must be in control with level 3 and level 4 can cause some issues in the complex national transportation infrastructure that we have. In particular, when you think about on any given trip, on the type of things that you encounter on any given day, when you give that decision-making process to an automated vehicle, it could be outside of the vehicle's sensors. The vehicle doesn't have the context of the situation on how to handle that situation, or numerous factors can change in a very rapid pace. And with so many variables that influence whether the vehicle can handle it or the human must handle it, with sometimes the situation changing rapidly, requiring the vehicle to hand back control to the human, while the human may be disengaged from driving, maybe scrolling on their phones, sending an email, eating, or doing their makeup, they may not be, one, prepared to regain control at a moment's notice, and two, they may take more time to develop their context of the situation to know what to do next. So this is where smart infrastructure like the Transurban Express lanes can offer a very controlled and safe environment for operations. With all of our different technologies and our 24/7 monitoring, with smart infrastructure, we can augment the vehicle sensors by sharing what's around the bend or over the horizon. So with that in mind, I'm going to talk about what Transurban contributed to this project. First, the team, as Mike mentioned in task 1, entered the design and requirement stage where we reviewed industry best practices such as the Automated Vehicle Safety Consortium, which defined variables that most dramatically influence the vehicle's operational domain. Then Transurban did a holistic evaluation of our express lanes, both on the physical and digital side, to understand the physical aspects of our road, such as the striping, the curvature, the super elevation of the roadway. We also then evaluated the data side of it, which is what sort of information is flowing off the roadside sensors, and where did we need to either add additional devices or find a third party to provide that sort of data. This included how readily accessible the data was, if it was accurate, reliable, and secure. Accurate or accessible and reliable in that the data was dynamic and changing on a second-by-second basis, so the information needed to be readily available to be able to send to the vehicle on a second basis. Accurate and secure in that the information needed to be relevant to the vehicle and verified of no bad actors. So as you see on this slide, there are just some examples of information that were identified as being crucial for that ADSs would benefit from. Weather, giving the visibility, precipitation, and temperature, which all affect the operation of an ADS. And for congestion, with locations on where the lane slowdown is, or work zones, with giving information on the location, speed, type of work, and other restrictions that happen in work zones. And lastly, we wanted this platform tool to be leveraging cloud computing technology so that it's future-ready and scalable on a nationwide or global basis. So after we defined the different aspects of data feeds that we wanted, and we then launched into the software development process. And we broke these down into key distinct factors. The first was we needed to take the physical road and digitize it. So we needed to take all the lanes, shoulders, and barrier walls and digitize it so that we could actually make sense of that. So basically, a vehicle with highly accurate sensors and GPS drove and collected all the road markings and barriers along the express lanes. After that, we had to make sense of all that information and link it together so that one segment of the roadway made sense and connected with the other segment of the roadway. We tried to make the segments as small as practically possible with the granularity of data that we had access to. One particular aspect that made this incredibly difficult is that the express lanes are reversible. So the ADS needed to be able to drive northbound and southbound and still have all of the data make sense to it. Another piece of key distinct phases of the software development piece was accessing all the different data sets and making sense of the data. For example, taking a ton of different data sources and making them talk the same language and in the same units, then being able to properly locate that information on the roadway where it belongs so you can provide the right information to the vehicle. For example, we have a lot of traffic sensors out on our roadways that will say, I'm sensor 123 ABC, lane 1 is 50 miles per hour and lane 2 is 45 miles per hour. But if I don't know where sensor 123 ABC is and I don't know where lane 1 or lane 2 is, that doesn't really help me at all, and I can't provide that information to the vehicle and actually provide the context it needs. The final key phase of this project was a way to interact with this tool. The user interface was intended to allow Transurban operators, which have 24/7 operation staff in our facility monitoring the express lanes in the roadway, to be able to have a tool to be able to interact with what's happening out on the roadway, what's happening with the automated vehicle, and is there any sort of actions that I need to take. So another fun part of this project, you heard Mike and Joe talk about some applications that we created for this project. So with this, we created two different sort of applications that were generated algorithms based on the different sort of information that was flowing off of the roadway. The first was a speed harmonization application, and the intention of this is to be able to identify bottlenecks and develop recommendations, speeds upstream to slow down approaching cars. The intention of this is twofold. One, to reduce secondary crashes by lowering the abrupt speed change, causing rear-end collisions, and increasing the throughput efficiency of the road through that bottleneck. The other app was the cooperative automated driving systems to increase freeway mobility. And this was to provide speed and headway guidance to connected and automated vehicles to harmonize and maximize the roadway's efficiency. So for example, because of the roadside technology, we know the speed and distance between cars on the main line of traffic. We're able to take that information and send it to the vehicle on, for example, an on-ramp, so that it can optimize its speed and join the string of vehicles traveling together. So just to wrap up, I have 4 things to leave you all with, is that 1, this is just the beginning of the research that needs to happen in this space. Our team did a massive amount of work, but work and testing, there still is a ton to be done. 2, the success of this technology and implementation more broadly will take across a collaboration across all the different stakeholder groups. And 3, this type of investment and others need to continue to grow in the future as we continue to iterate on this process. And 4, education is going to be key of all stakeholder groups for this, whether it's from first responders to government and the general public for acceptance of the automated vehicle technology. Thank you for your time today.
All right. So for the demonstrations that we conducted, I kind of want to give a little bit of context for kind of how those played out. But we did, effectively have key user groups available. So we had OEM representatives there and AV developers to kind of show the solutions that we had come up with. We had stakeholder interaction with public safety, both in the demonstrations we conducted in Northern Virginia, but also on our test track smart road facility, we call it, and in Blacksburg, which gave law enforcement partners in a little bit of time to get a little bit more hands-on and actually interact with the technology. And we had quite a bit of media coverage when we were doing these as well. So it was really kind of set up to be more of a ride-hailing kind of experience where, something like an Uber where you would just, get into an automated vehicle, begin to drive, and you would be getting some information from a display within the vehicle about what the vehicle was doing so that you felt safe and you felt like it was the vehicle was operating correctly. We did, again, the majority of the demonstrations were done on I-395 in Northern Virginia, but we also, conducted the same thing again in Blacksburg as well, again, offering a better opportunity for our public safety folks to get more hands-on. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get past this, start talking a little bit more about the vehicle. So our vehicle was a Ford F-150, as was mentioned earlier. It's a hybrid vehicle, which worked out really well because the amount of power that's required to run all the perceptions and computing solutions to be able to make this vehicle drive itself effectively take up to over 100 amps at certain times. So if you think about the power generation that you get on a hybrid vehicle that makes it possible to do that. It was also nice because we could put almost all the electronics in the back bed area underneath a tonneau cover. That way we didn't have to have the heat and the noise of those solutions in the cab with the riders. And effectively, we integrated in an NVIDIA Hyperion 7.2. For those who are kind of techno nerds, you sort of know that that's a generation back now from the perception solutions that are available, but it was the ideal thing at the time. And we also put a data speed drive-by-wire kit, which allowed us to control all the steering, throttle, brake, all the control inputs, by wire effectively. And then we had added our own brain, if you will, a system in there. It was a ROS-based command and control platform. And then we had to teach it to do a variety of different things to be able to support these scenarios. And so some of those were to be able to recognize hand signals, as was mentioned earlier, to recognize stop signs and other signs along the roadway and react to them. but also doing things like picking up blue lights on vehicles to show that that's a police or a law enforcement officer, but also red and blue lights on a particular vehicle, red lights on a particular vehicle would be one that's more fire and EMS oriented, and so we need to teach the vehicle to behave a little bit differently depending upon what it is sensing. So I'm going to go ahead and step into some examples of what this looks like. So one of the scenarios was really about how do you detect that you're being pulled over if you're a driverless vehicle. And so for almost all of these scenarios, we built one solution that was sensor-based only. So I could only use the sensors on my own vehicle to be able to understand what's happening around me and how I should operate. The second way we did it was with connectivity. So we added on this cellular, or the V2X components, so that we were exchanging messages between the vehicles, which of course made life a lot easier. We definitely demonstrated the value of connectivity when it comes to things like this. So here's an example of us operating up on I-395. Our Virginia State Police were great partners in this program, but they offered to play a role effectively in our scenarios. So the blue lights come on. On the bottom left, you're seeing the machine vision algorithm that we developed that's picking up those blue lights and effectively telling the brain that this is an that this is a police officer. And there's a set of rules effectively that the vehicle is following. And this is kind of what those rules look like. So based on what lane it is in and what lane the police officer is in, and if they tend to stay and hover behind the vehicle, it will then react appropriately to pull over. We also needed to make sure that we were pulling over in a safe way, which meant if there's another, let's say law enforcement vehicle, let's say like parked on the shoulder, maybe has somebody else pulled over or attending some other issue, we had to follow the move over laws, right, that are a requirement, right, in our state. So we slowed the vehicle down, potentially changing lanes to get around that parked law enforcement vehicle that was on the side of the road. And so we learned a lot in working with our Virginia State Police partners in that, when they saw, or when we were making the reaction to have the vehicle change lanes left again to follow the move over law, they really recommended, hey, just slow it down and don't do the lane change at that point because I think you're going to take off if you're accelerating and then changing lanes to the left. And so we learned to sort of change the behavior based on the feedback from the law enforcement professionals. This is an example, something that we've seen in San Francisco up in California when our own chip, which is the ADS vehicle, is now backing up because it came into a situation where the ambulance was coming at it in its own lane of traffic. So it had, number one, identified that vehicle was responding and that we needed to back up and move around and do that immediately so that we're not standing there in the middle of the roadway blocking that vehicle from moving forward at that time. At the same time, there's a fleet management solution in the background that the minute that this vehicle picks up that there is a public safety vehicle that is approaching in the lane, it'll start sending video out to the fleet manager so that they can look at what's going on as well. Now, it's not our intention to ever have a fleet manager drive a vehicle, but perhaps suggesting where it could go to get out of the way. So we built in an interface where the fleet manager is looking at the video, he sees open space back into the left through the vehicle's cameras that they're sending video into, and then he can say, okay, go back and left because that's your best chance to get out of the way of this vehicle. But one of the critical things there was really don't take a lot of time to make these responses, right? You can't take 5 minutes and block the roadway while that's happening. And so we had, I think, some pretty good success in being able to incorporate, again, the V2X EVA messages, and again, it made that process just all that much easier. It's called an emergency vehicle alert message. It's part of the connected vehicle data exchange process that's been defined and exercised by this program to improve safety in these kind of situations. So this is another component that we built in. It's called an emergency external control panel. In talking with law enforcement, well, you might want to, you might ask, well, why would you ever pull over an automated vehicle? It's always going to follow the rules and the law. But I think we know from our law enforcement stakeholders that they pull over vehicles to contact the individuals within just as much as they do for all the other purposes. And so we still needed a way, once they're pulled over, for that law enforcement officer to feel safe as they're approaching the vehicle. And so we have two ways of doing that. This first one, again, is the external emergency control panel. Our concept was to use an RFID card to be an authority management solution so that you would touch the RFID card very much like you would in your hotel room. They would be issued these cards, right, to the appropriate agencies, and that would then open this access panel. See this operating here on the side. So that pushes back Kind of the easiest way for us to have a control panel in there that was exposable was to push that light unit backwards, and then they could have 4 controls under there. One is to disable automation, one is to call for a voice call with the fleet manager, the other is to put it into a tow mode so that it could be towed safely, and the other one is a complete power and disabling of that vehicle altogether. So that location was critical, we believe, in that it allowed the officer to be able to observe what the occupants of the vehicle are doing without just having to run up to the window, right, and be able to disable this vehicle without exposing themselves to undue risk. However, it did not give as many, I guess, sort of self-help features as we gave with a window display that we developed. So this is meant to simulate an embedded touchscreen display that can be presented on the window of the vehicle. We actually accomplished this by doing rear projection through a light transmissive film and then adding the touch-sensitive panel on it and then integrating the two together. But as somebody would approach this vehicle, the LiDAR units on there would detect that somebody was approaching, and then we would turn on effectively the display on that side of the vehicle so it was ready for them when they came to interact with it. But some of the solutions, so we can get that to play. Okay, so this is effectively, you're getting a touchscreen display where you can disable automation, you can view the registration or other documentation from the vehicle, or you can potentially call a fleet manager for a video call right from the window as well. And through that transmissive display, we were able to maintain enough brightness and resolution to be able to do this in direct sunlight as well, which was interesting, an additional interesting problem to solve. Let's see. So this one is the manual traffic control. So this is a staged incident on I-395 where we are approaching effectively a stalled or a crashed vehicle. We've got an officer or a person that's outside the vehicle giving hand signal controls. So at this point, they've stopped both sides of traffic, waving one vehicle through. And then our vehicle then is able to pick up the officer and zero in on their hand signals, and you'll see an example of that here in a minute. The challenge here is really about, does everybody who's giving hand signals do it sort of in the same standardized way? And there is a standardized way to do it, but not everybody's always going to do it that same way. There's a lot of challenges with the lighting that is behind and or in front of this person. But we were able to train it well enough so it was about 95% of the time that it would recognize that hand signal and go through. Now we know that there's a lot of problems with things like skin tones. Again, the lighting that I talked about is problematic. I would say we got it to work fairly well for the demonstration activities that we did, but it's not 100%. And I know that there are many AV developers out there who have dumped a ton of money into this, tens of millions of dollars into trying to solve the same problem. But I can tell you, in my opinion, it's not solved 100% at this point. And it's something that we're just going to have to think through, what are the better solutions that we can use. And so for this example, we have a smart vest, which is a product that VTTI had come up with in the past for work zone workers, right, to be able to identify where they're at and potentially give them information. But that allowed us to identify where the person was in higher detail, again, using or in higher accuracy, right? So it used RTK corrected GPS, which gets down to about 20 centimeters accuracy for their location. And they can broadcast what's called a personal safety message. Again, it's all part of that connected vehicle message set. And then they can actually say, hey, I'm actually giving manual traffic control, and the current solution is that you can go or not go, effectively almost like a stoplight. And we built a little wand that had a button on it that they could say go or not, not go. And so that was the connected version of that solution that we deployed as well. All those require, I guess, more technology to deploy it into the departments, for people that are going to use them, and that's a challenge from both a funding and just I guess an organizational perspective to be able to get that kind of thing in place. But I think we did show that it would be beneficial, could that technology be made available. This is the example showing the flagging operation. So if you're traveling at highway speeds with using own-ship sensors alone, it's really tough to be able to pick up this stop sign in time to be able to actually stop. And so we are reading the signs along the way and interpreting them and slowing the vehicle down as it approaches the flagger so that there is a good opportunity for it to be able to pick it up in time and come to a stop, again, following the commands from that flagging operator. And again, the HMI in the upper left is kind of showing you what the information that we're giving to the rider inside the vehicle so that they can be assured that the vehicle is responding appropriately into what it ought to be in the road. Once it says go, we have machine vision algorithms that pick out the locations of the individual cones, and we'll show that here in a second, and it automatically defines a pathway through those cones on the fly as it's driving through. That's a very challenging thing to do. It's much easier for us to have a plotter unit that somebody who is setting up this work zone can go out and plot about 4 or 5 points. That'll develop a path that can then be communicated to that vehicle as it approaches that scene so that it has much more certainty and reliability in how it's going to operate on that path as it goes through that flagging operation. I think Joe mentioned quite a bit about the rescue info and post-crash care. So if there ever was a crash with this vehicle, we kind of expanded on the solution that Joe showed to be able to look at those rescue sheets. In this concept, the ADS vehicle itself, once it identifies it's in a crash, would send a buffer of video again up to the fleet manager. The fleet manager would then go through a process of starting to help identify what the condition of the occupants of the vehicle are and how many of them there are, both before and after the crash in case somebody gets thrown from the vehicle. They would then call, of course, 911 to roll the appropriate assets to be able to help resolve the situation, but they would give them a 4-digit code that would then link this particular incident. So they would do that over the dispatch, and then those that have the tablet, I guess, in the responding units could pull up more detailed information about precisely where that vehicle is located currently, about what kind of crash it was. So this was a head-on 105 mile per hour crash. And then what other hazards are there? So if you have battery hazards, if you have other kinds of hazards, they can all be listed here. We can, again, pull up just as Joe showed, for our F-150, all the, the systems that are in the vehicle, you can toggle them on and off using the buttons that are on the bottom right. But all the while the response is going on, the fleet manager is going through effectively a wizard, right? You can't expect necessarily the people who are going to be running these fleet operations to be EMT level trained people. So we developed a wizard that they can go through to be able to identify the consciousness states of the individuals. And there's also sensors on board the vehicle in the seats that can give you things like her heart rate, respirations, and other conditions. So they would go through this entire process, continuing to fill out information. That gets forwarded to those who are responding if they have the page pulled up on their tablets in the vehicle. This is the last scenario, is kind of showing the cooperative automated driving that we've talked about. Again, the vehicle has been trained to operate in a string. And what that means is it's looking for other vehicles. Once it enters this zone on the roadway that says that, hey, CADS IFM can be run in this area, if it sees that there's a vehicle in front of it that is also CADS IFM enabled, it will then try to operate in a string. And for what that means to us is it's going to operate at 5 miles per hour above a target or recommended speed, so that it actually closes the distance to, get to the minimum headway that it's supposed to be following. And so if enough of these vehicles recognize each other and get in a row and they're all trying to, compress down to the recommended headways, then they'll operate in a string. The idea is that we don't want to have to think through or have some higher level executive orchestrating, the formation of these and the dissolution of these strings. We want it to be a little bit more of a random occurrence that happens when they're out there, so that we don't have to worry about how that actually forms up and works. And we want everybody to have free will, so to speak, right? So if you're coming up to a vehicle that's operating slower and you want to change lanes, you can drop out of that string anytime you want to. You're not on a common mission with everybody else. You're kind of acting on your own behalf at that point. So the HMI up here on the upper right is kind of showing the current set speed is 65 with a 1.5 second headway. We operated at speeds from 70 down to 35 miles per hour and about 0.9 seconds headway. And we were able to do this regularly, on the road up there. So I think we were fairly successful at putting that together. I mentioned before we had a fleet management and service integrated. I think in the current state of where automated vehicle development is, I think that the human is still important to be able to resolve some of these sort of corner case kinds of scenarios. And again, we don't advocate, sort of hands-on remote driving. We do advocate giving, approval to what the vehicle wants to do or make it think through what a different solution might be. So I go backwards instead of going forward, that kind of thing. And so we built that entire solution up, and we're able to exercise that quite a bit through this process. And that remains, I think, a really solid platform for us to be able to do additional work for how to train and develop a software solution that can be used by people who are, trained up to a certain level, but there's maybe a couple people monitoring many vehicles as opposed to a one-to-one scenario, which would not be feasible at scale. And there's the QR code, so there's a data dissemination portal that's been stood up and is available now. We continue to add more data to that all the time, so we do have all of the underlying data, so all these connected vehicle messages, the locations, and all the other data collection that we did is available there for developers to use. But there's also narrative videos that talk about these scenarios and the problems we're trying to solve and the approach that we took to solving them in higher detail. And so we've had, I guess, quite a bit of feedback on those, and I think people are, finding them valuable in terms of being able to describe the problem, but also how we went about the solution. All right, and that's what we had to talk to you about today. I think we've got some time for questions, perhaps.
If we have any questions in the audience, I have a mic I can bring around. Any questions?
Jonathan Feit, Beyond Lucid Technologies, and I'm also here on behalf of the Journal of Emergency Medical Services. So just wanted to pick up on that 4-digit code, for example, that you mentioned you would provide where a 911 call goes, and at the same time you've got somebody essentially knowing what's up with the vehicle, sort of the summary you provided. Can you describe whether you have an interest or have looked into the ability to provide information about the context of the occupants of the vehicle? For example, earlier today there was a discussion about special health needs. Let's say someone has a mobility issue, cognitive issue, underlying disability, where those responders might want to have that information before they get there. Have you guys looked into providing essentially a clinical insight? You mentioned about vitals and whatnot, and sort of the basic collection, but obviously there could be a lot of information about who this person is and what their needs are that could be known ahead of time.
Yeah, and I think, if we think through kind of how this would roll out, there would likely be some kind of an app that somebody would have to register themselves, right, to be able to call for this vehicle in the first place. Most likely that would be the entry point, right, where you could self-describe whatever issues you might have. And so we did do some scenario development and HMI development for working with blind and low vision occupants or participants. And so they would enter that information, and then the HMI in the vehicle would treat them a little differently, right? Maybe extract and present information to them in a different way. So I feel like that's a point at which people could self-describe, what their scenario is, whatever that turns out to be. But yeah, so I think that's an opportunity, very much so, for giving them more information.
Did that go? You mentioned you started. Did that go? Did you guys proceed with that?
I mean, we did the testing on the scenarios, yes. So there's some data about that. It's called a negotiated drop-off scenario that we did with the blind and low vision folks. So this is a scenario where I need to get dropped off at that building, but just like today, the police and the fire had the roadway closed off because apparently a window fell out of a high-rise building, right? So then where is your alternative drop spot going to be? Like we, as sighted, I guess, riders would just say, hey, just drop me here. But I think we want to provide more information from the vehicle as it should know more about what's available, right? So I can drop you behind the building, a secondary door. I can, pull into a parking space and have you get out there, and those are the kinds of interactions we try to support.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions?
Hi, thanks for your presentations. So much good stuff in there, and I'm actually wondering when you guys sleep. So I hope you do at some point. I'm wondering how with the cooperative automated driving, how it's going to deal with yahoos on the highways. If they're going to be somehow a part of the connected, I forget the word they used for it, to have them all linked. And strings, thank you. So when the yahoos are doing their Yahoo thing, I'm sure it's going to detect it. How does it react to it? I'm just wondering what your thoughts are.
Go ahead, if you want to.
Yeah, so, there's an emerging standard development in SAE, and the document's J3216. All the levels of automation listed are J3016, so all the levels of automation described there. As far as that standards development is moved, is defined and characterized, all the different players and the modes, we certainly imagine motorcycle riders and other folks, on these connected roadways communicating, if they are enabled, to join those strings. But if you're talking about vulnerable road users, separate topic. They might integrate some of these personal safety messages or, pedestrian safety messages or other nascent, message sets that are emerging, but not necessarily being part of that vehicular traffic. When we imagine connected driving automation, it's not just at highway speeds, but that's really the launching off point.
What if you're above and beyond the highway speed? So from Maryland, there's constantly, and my description of Yahoo is, oh, he's coming at 100, stay in your lane. You don't know where he's going next. So that's what I meant.
In strings, that'd be safer. I mean, you would not necessarily need to move out of that string if it was moving along, as a connected, driving string. You wouldn't necessarily have to move out of that string or even worry about those yahoos that might look to weave in between or, risk their lives going 150 on a motorcycle.
Yeah, so for the example, if somebody, when operating in a string, there is probably better opportunity for the entire string to be able to avoid like a rear-end collision, right, situation, because they would all immediately be communicating their status that they're slowing down and braking based on a lead vehicle, right, that had come into a braking scenario. And that way you don't have to deal with the human perception or reaction time element of that, which is what causes that effectively compression and ultimately a rear-end collision. So it can help in that scenario as well. I think, operationally today, if you had a Yahoo, right, pull in the middle of our 4-car string, it would break it into two-car strings automatically, and it would just keep running, right, the way it was. But it would just, again, it's a more organic method of formation and dissolution when you're just looking for those that are wanting to operate that same way. Yeah.
Other questions? No? Well, we are at 5 o'clock, and we are the last thing standing between you and happy hour. So if there are no other questions, we will wrap up the session. Thank you guys so much for coming. We appreciate it.